Advanced Financial Modeling, Topic 3, VBA for Finance, Learning Objective number 6, Matrix Operations and VBA Arrays or Matrices. So using matrix operations and arrays and user functions, we've covered this a little bit in an earlier topic, and that is if you want to use matrix multiplication in VBA, you must use application.mmult. Just like if I wanted to use the transpose function within VBA, I would use application.transpose. And if you want to use an array of numbers or cells as an input to a function, in this case you can say as range as the function as function types, but they're not needed, but you'll see them often. But I do like doing that sometimes because in this program called port mean, which is going to accept a column of returns and a column of weights as parameters, it's kind of nice to see as range because if someone's looking at the program, they're saying, oh, the user is expected to enter more than one row or more than one column. And in this program here, you can see the program simply does an mmult of a transpose of the weights times the returns, and we had to transpose the weights because we can't matrix multiplication or matrix multiply two columns. It has to be a row times a column because the inner dimensions have to be the same. So we did this program earlier, but it's good to see that. Talk about matrix operations in VBA. So let's go ahead and use this program. I'll jump to the spreadsheet and show that if I wanted to input this program, I would insert the program, put in the returns as the column O and the weights as column N, and then I would hit OK, and then I would get portfolio mean. Okay, and we're making sure I get the same values using a sum product here. Sum product actually requires either two rows or two columns. All right, and that's a good way of thinking about, by the way, thinking about matrix multiplication. Matrix multiplication is a series of sum products, but if there's only one row and one times one column, it is simply a sum product. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint, and what we're going to do is talk about the next topic is you can input arrays using parameters and refer to any item using a row and column identifier. So let's take a look at this program. This program called PVX. This PVX program has two parameters, cash flows as range and R. So for example, the user, when they insert this program, might just highlight these three rows as the cash flows, $100, $150, $200, and then the interest rate would just be here. So that's my R, and this is my cash flows. And so let's see what the program does. Well, let me just tell you what the program does. The program will take the present value of any series of cash flows in which the user inputs as an array. And when I use the word array, by the way, I use the word array, matrix, range. They kind of mean the same thing in Excel. It's a more than one row or more than one column. Okay, the only time I'm more specific is sometimes I'll use the word vector. I'm only talking about a single row or single column. So if I want to take the present value of these three random cash flows at 10%, I would just take 100 over 1.1 to the first plus 150 over 1.1 squared and 200 over 1.1 cubed, assuming end of period cash flows. And you can see I know the value is 365. So let's see how this program works. Get the parameters. So I got the cash flows and the R. First, I'm going to do something called .rows.count is a VBA object. .rows.count. And whatever you put in front of the .rows.count, some variable name, in this case cash flows, it's going to count the number of rows in cash flows. So if the user enters, say, these three values, the n, this new variable, takes on the value of 3 since there are 3 rows in cash flows. Okay, so I figured out there are 3 rows in cash flows. Why do I need to do that? Because I want to do a for loop to make 3 calculations. And if I highlighted 5 cash flows, it needs to make 5 calculations. So I figure out how many rows are in cash flows, And then I say for I equal 1 to n, or in this case 3. PVX equals PVX plus. So hopefully you know what that means when you see a function name, or I'm sorry, a variable name equals a variable name plus, it's going to aggregate, keep adding to itself. And notice what I'm doing here. PVX equals PVX plus, PVX has 0 right now. Cash flows refers to this input, and it's saying cash flows I, comma 1. In VBA, if you want to refer to any item within an array, you just use row column identifier, row, comma, column. So this is a column vector. 1 column and 3 rows. So what it's doing, it's taking cash flow I, comma 1. Remember, I is initially set to the value of 1, so it's going to take cash flow 1, 1, which is this here. This is 1, 1. This is 2, 1. And this is 3, 1. So it's going to take cash flows 1, 1, the value of $100, divided by 1.1 to the first power. Next I, set I equal to 2. PVX equals PVX plus. Now PVX currently has the 91 in it, plus cash flows 2, comma 1, which will be the second row, first column. And it's going to take that to the 1.1 squared, which is 123. Next I, set I, next I goes up, sets I equal to 3. PVX equals PVX plus the third cash flow, 3, comma 1 over 1.1 cubed, and then it's all done, and we have the value of the 3 cash flows in this function called PVX. So you can see in the program how it's input, or in spreadsheet. I can insert the program, since I already have this in VBA for you, and this is called PVX. Cash flows, the user is going to enter these 3 cash flows. R is the discount rate, and hit OK. And there's my 365, and it is done. Okay, so that's kind of handy. And this is a very common thing to do. Before you do a for loop, you determine how many times you have to do it, and often involves counting rows or columns. And it makes sense in this program. If the user gave you 3 rows in the input, it must want you to calculate 3 numbers. All right, so another thing I want to mention, if you're referring to a single column vector or row vector in VBA, you don't actually need to say comma 1 here, because it knows there's only 3 items within cash flows. So I could just refer to I. So it could just be I in brackets. You don't need I, comma 1. But I actually like doing it because I want to basically tell the user, hey, I'm expecting a column vector here. So they see there's just 1 column, but not needed. All right, here's another interesting thing in VBA. You can create internal VBA arrays. So you're not inputting a VBA, or inputting an array by the user highlighting data or columns or rows. You actually create a VBA array. Now this gets a little more interesting. If you want to create an array in VBA, say a 2x2 array in VBA, you have to dim it, and you have to redim it. This will make a little more sense later, but you have to remember how to do it. So if I want to create a variable name or an array name, and I'll just give it a name of array name. It could be any name. I'm going to use the word, in the program, I'm going to say dim, give some array name, and then open and close brackets. That tells VBA, this is an array. It's not a single value. Once you do that statement, you then tell VBA what are the dimensions, how many rows and how many columns, the dimension size. So after the dim statement, you then need to redim, same array name, and then actually put in the rows and columns, say 2x2, 2, comma 2. All right. So that's really weird. You have to dim and redim. Why can't I just dim it the first step? And I assume it has to do with the fact that VBA has to be told it's an array. So you first tell it's array, and then tell it the dimensions. All right. Here's another very odd thing with VBA, and you have to correct it right away because you're going to get confused. In VBA, when you talk about row and column, row, comma, column indicators in VBA, VBA default is, we call it base 0 row index indicator. In other words, if it assumes that the first item of any array is row 0, column 0. Makes no sense. In a normal world where I live in, we just say, well, the first item must be 1, 1, first row, first column, but not in VBA. So in VBA, they assume, unless you tell it otherwise, that the first item is row 0, column 0. So if you created in VBA and you wanted a 2x2 matrix, 2x2, you're not actually creating this. What you're actually creating is you're actually creating a 3x3 because you're actually creating 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. So in VBA, if you don't tell VBA anything differently, if you just say I want a 2x2 matrix, it actually creates a 3x3 matrix because it's adding row 0, column 0. However, I always make this change in all my VBA modules that use matrices. At the top of the module, I put a statement called option base 1. That converts it to the normal world. If you do that and you say I want a 2x2, you get a 2x2. So I'm going to go to my module. I input option base 1. It's already there for you. And I want to create this one program called prices to returns. And that one program is going to build an array based on the parameters input. So here's what this program is going to do. The program's prices to returns only has one parameter, prices. So the user is going to input, in this case, this 5x1, 5 rows, 1 column of prices, $100, $150, $100, $200, $150. And what the function is going to do is give you percent returns. Hence the program's called prices to returns. Notice that if there are 5 prices, you only get 4 returns. Or more generally, if you have n number of prices, you get n number 1 returns. So how do I know what the values are. I've made the calculations in the spreadsheet. If it goes from 100 to 150, it's a 50% return. And if it goes from 150 to 100, it's a minus 33% return. How can I get VBA to compute this entire array for me? It's not that useful, but it's useful to think about how VBA manipulates arrays and creates arrays. So option base 1 gets me my normal world. The first item is going to be row 1, column 1. Function prices to returns, one parameter, prices. I could say prices is range if I wanted to. Now I'm going to dim temp matrix. I want to create a temporary matrix. That temporary matrix is going to be, in this case, this 4x1. So that's going to be my temp matrix. But I'm going to have to build it first. That's my temp matrix. All right, so dim temp matrix, open close bracket. That creates kind of a blank array in VBA without dimensions. Now I need to give it the dimensions. Now, how I'm going to figure out, how do I know it's going to be a 4x1, 4 rows, 1 column? Because the user, when they insert the program, are going to add this as a parameter, 5 prices. So if there's 5 prices in a column, you're going to only get 4 returns. So I'm going to figure out how many prices were just given to me. N equals prices.rows.count. So in this case, it's going to return a value of 5. Then I can redim my temp matrix as a 4x1, or in other words, a 5 minus 1 by 1. Because remember, if you have n number of prices, you'll have n minus 1 number of returns. And then here's where all the work's going to be done. For I equal 1, 2, 4. Temp matrix, in this case, 1, 1. So it's going to be calculating this number here. Temp matrix 1, 1 equals prices, and remember I is equal to 1, prices to 1 1 plus 1, 1. The second price minus prices 1, 1, the first price, divided by prices 1, 1, the first price. So it's going to take the second price minus the first price divided by the first price, and it's going to return 50%. That's what it's going to put into temp matrix 1, 1. Okay? Next I sets I equal to 2. Temp matrix 2, 1. That's going to be this cell right here, and when I insert the program. That's going to be prices 2 minus 1, 1, minus 2 comma 1. I'm sorry, 2 plus 1, 1, minus prices 2, 1. So it's going to be the third price minus the second price over the second price. It's going to do that four times to calculate these 4 prices, and it's going to place them in temp matrix 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1. In other words, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1. And then last step, prices to returns equals temp matrix. So I'm just going to make my full function name equal to that matrix I built and function. So let's go ahead and put that into the spreadsheet. How would I input that? I'm going to select this entire array, the entire array right here, and I'm going to do my FX and find my prices to returns. Whoops. Prices to returns. I'm going to input my 5 prices. Now be careful. Control Shift Enter, because I'm entering this program across this array, not just a single cell. And there's my values. And it matches to my test data. So I am good. So in this program, we went ahead and calculated prices based on returns by creating an internal variable of a matrix. In the next topic, we're going to do nested loops. It doesn't get any harder than that, which is good and bad because it doesn't get any harder than that, but it's hard. So see you in a minute.